Very good evening, my dear friends. I will speak about the promoters, the law relevant to promoters, and then procurement of capital to the company, and then the appropriate case law thereon. These are all the things, friends, we are going to discuss today. Basically, a company, whether it is a private limited company or a public limited company, would procure its capital by way of a loan capital or a share capital. Loan capital means the debts on behalf of the company the promoters contact. Share capital means the equity base, either the equity capital or preference share capital, which is put into the capital base of the company. What is the difference between these two? Equity share capital means that it is the equity shareholders who ultimately drive the destiny of the company with their decisions, and then the equity capital is non-refundable, whereas preference share capital after a particular time is refundable. Otherwise, prima facie, the capital of the company is non-refundable except it is redeemable preference shares. This is the basic concept of a corporate entity pertaining to capital base. So a company can procure capital by way of selling shares, and it could be equity or preference share capital, and it could make out loan capital, and the loans could be long-term loans, short-term loans, debentures, and then bonds, and then in different ways this particular capital could be procured. Ultimately, whether it is loan or share capital, it is capital. The total, ultimately, it forms to the final capital base of the company. Only thing is, if it is a case of a loan capital, it is refundable. It is a case of a share capital, it is non-refundable, except redeemable preference shares. This is how, friends, we have to understand this concept. Then, with regard to the equity share capital or preference share capital, I have already told you the capital could be divided into different segments. That is, from the authorized capital, whatever has been called up is called called up capital. Whatever is subscribed is subscribed capital. Whatever is paid up out of that is paid up. In fact, before that, whatever capital is issued to the public from the authorized capital is called issued capital. So, authorized capital, issued capital, and then subscribed capital, then called up capital, then paid up capital. The last part is reserve capital. This is how the classification of capital base is made out for procuring the capital of the company through shares. It is debentures, then debentures are payable at a stretch, and then loans, for example, short-term loans and long-term loans, and then the bonds also. So, in this fashion, the company gets funds. Solomon versus Solomon and Company Limited case. If you see, he procured share capital, he procured loan capital, and loan capital by way of debentures, and then other loans from the creditors. I hope now you understand. I have explained the case law thereon. Then the share capital also. Ultimately, it formed the total capital base. Now, friends, who is the person making this particular capital base? The person who takes the leadership and who organizes this is called the promoter. Promoter. This is the most important aspect. Friends, promoters are the persons who constitute the shareholders base, the subscribers base initially, and then bring the company into existence, register it. Either 2 with a private company or 7 subscribers for a public limited company. And then the 7 subscribers could include a corporate entity again, or the 2 for a private limited company can include again a corporate entity. And then this particular persons ultimately, as per the objects clause of the Memorandum of Association, take necessary steps for the benefit of the company. And then they drive the company to reach the goals, and they would become the directors of the company also. That is why they are called promoters, or those who promote the corporate entity to come into existence and to move forward to achieve the objects laid in the Memorandum of Association. This is the basic concept of promoters. Basically, promoters are called the persons who undertake the formation of the company in general, which you can write in the examination. And then the promoters moot the idea of forming a corporate entity and then take requisite steps to incorporate the company by getting it registered with the Register of Companies. Then friends, the promoters also provide the necessary initial and subsequent share capital and also loan capital to the company to proceed with its business and reach its objectives. And normally the promoters will become the subsequent directors of the company also. And then, even though the term promoter is earlier not defined under the Companies Act 1956, and a reference has been made to the promoters earlier under Section 2, subsection 69 of the Companies Act 2013, the promoter has been clearly defined now. So we get a state definition. So Section 2, subsection 69 says that a promoter means a person who has been named as such in a prospectus or is identified by the company in the annual return referred to in Section 92. It's very clear now. And then, second, who has control over the affairs of the company. Now, his characteristics are stated here in subsection 2. Who has control over the affairs of the company, directly or indirectly, whether as a shareholder or a director or otherwise, or in accordance with whose advice the directions or instructions the board of directors of the company is accustomed to act. This is the most important aspect. A person may not be named as a director, named as a promoter, may not be named as a promoter, but a particular person who is an ordinary employee is controlling, commanding, directing, taking leadership of running affairs of the company, and the board of directors is habituated, accustomed to act as per his instructions, then that person is called promoter. So tomorrow, for fixing responsibility, the corporate wheel could be lifted and then promoter could be held responsible. The promoter is put on a responsibility, failing which a liability follows. This is how the logic goes with regard to the corporate entity. Friends, further the proviso says, provided that nothing in subclause C shall apply to a person who is acting merely in a professional capacity. What does it mean? If a person is acting in a professional capacity as a lawyer, then at his command directions the board is accustomed to act, that lawyer is not a promoter. That lawyer is a professional, is a legal advisor. But the promoter is concerned. He is commanding the affairs of the company, and on his instructions, directions, the board is accustomed to act, then he is deemed to be the promoter of the company, whether named or not. So now section 2 subsection 69 says on one hand it could be the case that he is named, on the other hand it could be the case that he is on his instructions. The board is accustomed to act and he has the control of affairs of the company, directly or indirectly, irrespective of the fact whether he is a shareholder or a director or not. And in accordance with his advice, the directions or instructions, the board of directors of the company is accustomed to act. So friends, now unlike the 1956 Act and 2013 Act, we have got a clarity and then we have got a clear-cut information pertaining to promoters. Then friends, the next provision is section 39 of the Companies Act, where section 39 of the Companies Act says that with regard to the allotment of securities by a company, whether it is debentures or shares called securities, and then no allotment of securities of a company offered to the public for subscription shall be made unless the amount stated in the prospectus as a minimum subscription amount has been subscribed and the sums payable on application for the amount so stated have been paid to and received by the company by check or other instrument. That means unless the minimum subscription amount is paid off, right, the company, in fact, allotment cannot take place. Otherwise, the promoters have to refund the amount, right? That is under subsection 3, read with subsection 4, with a return filed with the Register of Companies. And in case any default is found under subsection 5 of section 39, the company and its officer who is in default shall be liable to a penalty for each default, and it shall be of 1,000 rupees for a day during which such default continues, or 1 lakh, whichever is less. So the maximum is 1 lakh. So with this, what you understand? The promoter has a responsibility, and dereliction of that entails liability also, penalty. Then the next important provision is section 30. Section 30 speaks of the prospectus being put in advertisement, and in that regard, where an advertisement of any prospectus of a company is published in any manner, it shall be necessary to specify therein the contents of its memorandum as regards the objects, the liability of members, and the amount of share capital of the company, and the names of the signatories of the memorandum. This is most important. And the number of shares subscribed by them, and its capital structure. Friends, this is also the responsibility of the promoter. Then the most important provision here is made very specifically under the provisions of the Companies Act, section 300. 300 says, with regard to winding up proceedings, the public examination of promoters and directors, and under 300, there is a caption, power of the National Company Law Tribunal to order examination of promoters, directors, etc. And then here the provision is very clear that where an order has been made for the winding up of a company by the National Company Law Tribunal, and the company liquidator has made a report to the tribunal under this particular Companies Act 2013, stating that in his opinion a fraud has been committed by any person in the promotion, formation, business or conduct of affairs of the company. Since its formation, the tribunal may, after considering the report, direct that such person or officer shall attend before the tribunal on a day appointed by it for that purpose, and he be examined as to the promotion or formation or the conduct of business of the company, or as to his conduct and dealings as an officer thereof. Then the other subsections deal with bit by bit the particular provisions thereon. And then the examination is in fact a crucial thing which could be fallen upon either a director of the company or a promoter of the company. This is the most important aspect. So, friends, here the promoters, in fact, are such persons who bring the company into existence, and ultimately they are the persons who have to follow the rules and regulations, the provisions of the act, make compliances, and then they have to ultimately face the responsibility, take the responsibility, and failing which face the liability also. Further, under the law, the promoters are also equally responsible under various provisions like sections 26, subsection 9, 450, section 34, 35, 447, 448. These are all the peripheral areas which, in fact, we will discuss in length. Already I have discussed about 2, subsection 69, then 39, then 30, and section 300. Friends, conceptually, what is the role of the promoter? What is his status? What is his stature in the company? And then, with the help of the above provisions and with the help of case law, we can ascertain as to, with regard to judicial pronouncements, the legal stature of or legal status of a promoter in a company. The first one, Twycross versus Grant. Twycross versus Grant. 1877, decided by Court of Appeal. It was defined that a promoter is one who undertakes to form a company with reference to a given project and to set it going, and who takes the necessary steps to accomplish that purpose. So, some of the definitions by judicial pronouncements I want to give to you for your benefit, which you can use for your research purpose or examination purpose or for general knowledge purpose also. It is up to you how you can make use of that. Tomorrow, 4th semester, you take promoters as a subject. All these definitions will come for thesis. Definitions will be useful for thesis. You can expand it further. And then some of these cases are available in Seeley's company cases. I have already given you the details of Seeley. Then the second important definition, Lord Justice Bowen has given a beautiful definition of promoters. Analyzed it in Valley Bridge Calico Printing Company versus Valley Bridge Calico Printing Company versus Green and Smith, 1890 Queen's Bench Decision, QBD, where the promoter is defined as a term not of law but of business, usually summing up in a single word a number of business operations familiar to the commercial world by which a company is generally brought into existence. Very, in fact, effective judgment. The third decision, re, that means reference, leads and Hanley, Theatres of Varieties Limited, 1902 Chancery Division, where it was held that a company also can be held liable as a promoter, because in the category of persons who can be promoters, an individual can be a promoter, a group of persons can be promoters, A corporate entity or corporate entities also can be promoters. This is the equation of law. Then, friends, the fourth one, that is that is reference. Great Wheel Polgut Limited. Great Wheel Polgut Limited, Chancery Division. The Chancery Division held that a solicitor, I told you already this, doing only legal work, even associated in the promotion of the company, is not a promoter. We have already seen the definition. Thus, a person acting for the company in his professional capacity is not a promoter. We have already seen the definition, I have told you. Now, these are all the judgments which are the background for this particular definition. Then, friends, the legal status and position of a promoter, how it is viewed. The promoter brings into existence the corporate entity, and he should not be mistaken as an agent or trustee of the company. If so, then corporate wheel could be lifted. That's what I also told you earlier. He cannot enter into any contract on behalf of the company before its incorporation, as pre-incorporated contracts are not binding on the company. As on a non-existing company, the contracts cannot be enforced unless the company is registered. The company is registered. The in fact, the contracts cannot be entered into. And then once company is registered, any number of contracts can be entered into. Otherwise, there is no question of giving validity to such kind of contracts. So, pre-incorporation contracts are void ab initio.
Void.
Ab initio. Void ab initio. The promoters basically stand, friends, in a fiduciary position, and they are not supposed to make any profits at the expense of the company he promotes, either directly or indirectly, without the consent of the company. Yes, madam, you have got a doubt? Shashikala, madam, you have got a doubt? Do you have a doubt?
So your voice is not
Do you have a doubt?
the voice is not clear. Its voice is breaking.
Hello?
No, sir, the voice is breaking. We are not.
Can you hear me now?
We are not. The voice is not breaking.
We are unable to
Now can you hear me?
clearly.
Now it's clear.
Can you hear me?
But in between it is going off. Sir.
Sorry?
In between it.
Can you hear me?
Now it's better.
Okay. So,
Yes.
the promoters, okay, shall I go on? Shall I go on? The promoters,
But we missed from the second judgment. We missed.
sorry?
The voice wasn't clear. From the second judgment onward, we missed out. We couldn't hear you properly.
You can hear me now?
Side.
Can you hear me now, sir?
Yes, sir. Now we can hear you. Now we can.
Shall I go ahead?
Please go ahead and please repeat the second judgment.
Okay. The promoters basically stand in a fiduciary position, and they are not supposed to make any profits at the expense of the company which he promoted, either directly or indirectly, without the sanction of the company. This is the most important aspect. Actually, there is no prohibition for making profits, but the profit should not be secret profits at the cost of the company, and it should be disclosed and known to the company. If the company has any objection, company means the majority shareholders, Foss versus Horvath. If the company has any objection, that can't be made out. It should be accounted to the company. Company permits, they can go ahead. So this is the most important thing. Whether a question can come, whether promoters can make any secret profits. The answer is there is no prohibition, but there is a restriction. They can do so only with the express permission of the company. Then, friends, there is an important judgment. Lagunas Nitrate Company versus Lagunas Syndicate, 1899 CD, Chancery Division. It was held that the promoters stand in a fiduciary relation to the company they promote and to those persons whom they induce to become shareholders in it. Because at their instance, many people might have become shareholders. So they stand in a fiduciary position. In the same way, in N. Erlanger versus New Sombrero Phosphate Company, 1878 appeal cases. Lord Keynes, Cairns, Keynes, explained the position of promoters, which has become a universal principle. What Lord Keynes says, the promoters stand, he says so, in my opinion, according to him, undoubtedly in a fiduciary position. They have in their hands the creation and molding of the company because they start the company. And they have the power of defining how and when, in what shape and in what manner, and under what supervision the company shall start into existence and begin to act as a trading corporation, and further how the funds could be utilized, and then what are the permutations and combinations thereon. So, with this, the company stands in a very fiduciary position. The fiduciary position emerges from the concept of trusteeship. Most important, trusteeship. In Omnium Electric Palaces Limited versus Baines, BINES, 1914 Chancery Court of Appeal. The law basically developed in London and England, and then it was flown to other parts of the world. It was held that the promoter is in this situation akin to that of a trustee of the company, and his dealings with it must be open and fair. He should be fair enough to make a disclosure of profits which he has made. Probably it is at the cost of the other shareholders of the company. So, prima facie, you consolidate this discussion, friends. You find the law imposes on the promoter two fiduciary duties. That one is the promoter should not make any secret profit out of the promotion of the company, and secret profits could be like selling promoter's own property to the company at an inflated price. The property cost is 50 lakhs, I sold it to the company for 1.5 crores. Only one I added there, that's all. But now you understand what is going to happen. Colossal, the company is put on a heavy liability of 1 crore rupees more and eroding the funds of the company. Promoters can't do that. Next, second point, the promoter should make a full disclosure to the company of all relevant facts and the truth, and also about the profit made by him and the personal interest involved in any deal with the company. And then once he declares it, it is for the company to take decision, majority, Foss versus Harbottle. In fact, Foss versus Harbottle is the best example of this particular instance. Then in Solomon and Solomon Company Limited, the promoters in fact has made the full disclosure of the facts and the profits made thereof. And the profit made by him personally was permissible. Go to Seeley and go to Solomon case, you read it. You understand several important issues pertaining to corporate entity. You will get a thorough knowledge of that. Now, friends, there is another important citation. Gluckstein versus Barnes. Gluckstein. Gluckstein versus Barnes. Barnes. 1900 appeal cases, where it was held that the secret profits and facts must be disclosed to an independent board of directors, and where there is no independent board of directors, the disclosure must be made to the intended shareholders as a whole, so that the responsibility is discharged. So it is very clearly to be understood that the promoters are not prohibited from making profits by selling their properties to the company, but what is required is transparency and disclosure. This is the most important aspect. And it is not permitted by the company by majority phosphoruses or what else, then it is not to be executed. So another important citation in this regard, Emma Silver Mining Company versus Lewis, Lewis, 1879. It was held that it was lawful for a promoter to sell his property to the company at a profit for himself, provided that he makes a disclosure. That's what I have been advocating. There should be transparency. Then, friends, Section 26, if you see, in fact, contains certain provisions in this regard that it deals with this particular fiduciary position. Section 27 deals with the matters to be stated in prospectus, and these particular matters to be stated in prospectus should be as per the information and set out such reports and financial information as may be specified by the Securities and Exchange Board in consultation with the central government. Under 1956 Act, it was the Companies Act which stated so. Now it is SEBI which has made out to the appropriate regulations. So in fact, they are all called in respect of the financial information, the regulations were made by SEBI. If you look at SEBI regulations pertaining to the matters to be stated in prospectus, you go to Google, you will go to website of SEBI, you will get the information where this particular aspect of disclosures is in fact referred to, and then where you find all this relevant information thereof. And then thus the promoters further, in case violate the fiduciary duties, the company can invoke the remedies against the promoters. The company means here the majority of the shareholders. And then they may even sue them personally for their misfeasance, and under such circumstances, the promoter suppose dies, most important, his estate is liable for abuse of his fiduciary position, of course, which is subject to the law of limitation and inheritance with regard to the institution of such suits, etc. And the promoter carries civil and criminal liabilities also under the provisions of the Companies Act. One such thing I will bring to your notice, Section 26, subsection 9. In fact, this is another very important provision, my dear friends. 26, subsection 9, that is civil and criminal liability. And then the promoters will have to restore and then to the company whatever benefit they got. Criminal side is they have to go to jail and pay penalty. 26.9 says, if a prospectus is issued in contravention of the provisions of this particular section 26, the company shall be liable with a fine which shall not be less than 50,000 rupees but which may extend to 3 lakhs rupees. And every person, including promoters, who is knowingly a party to the issue of the prospectus shall be punishable with imprisonment. Imprisonment, most important, for a term which may extend to 3 years, or with fine which shall not be less than 50,000 rupees but which may extend to 3 lakhs, or with both fine and imprisonment. This is number one. The second one is that with regard to non-compliances with the particular provisions pertaining to prospectus and other things, there are other provisions which are stated under section 34, 35, 447, 448 and 450. I will now take you to 34, my dear friends, and then section 34 deals with this particular aspect where you find that criminal liability for misstatement in prospectus under 34. Where a prospectus is issued, circulated or distributed under this chapter includes any statement which is untrue or misleading. Alright? Every person who authorizes that issue shall be liable under section 447. What is 447 anyway? I will read. Then, nothing in provisions, these provisions will apply to a person if he proves that such statement or omission was immaterial or he has reasonable grounds to believe he did up to time of issue of prospectus believe that the statement was true. That is a different aspect, that he proves his innocence. Otherwise, he is liable under section 447. Then friends, section 35 is civil liability. Civil liability is with regard to injunction, personal liability, restoration, restitution, all these things will come into picture, section 34 and 35. Then friends, now I will drive your attention to section 447. 447 deals with again this particular subject matter. 447 is punishment for fraud. That is under chapter 29 of the Companies Act. And then the punishment for fraud is you shall not be punishable with imprisonment which shall not be less than 6 months but which may extend to 10 years, and liable to fine which shall not be less than the amount involved in the fraud but which may extend to 3 times the amount involved in the fraud. Please see. And then friends, punishment for false statement in prospectus 448. It says if any written report, certificate, prospectus, statement or so and so provisions, act or rules made under any person makes a statement which is false in any material, particularly it is proving to be false or omits or any material fact, he shall be liable under 447. 447 just now I read over. So 447, 448 and 449 for giving false evidence. And then here it is 3 years imprisonment up to, or which may extend to 7 years also, minimum 3, maximum 7, and fine which may extend to 10 lakh rupees. And section 450, where there is no such particular provision is made, any punishment is provided, then a company or any officer, whoever is found guilty or whoever is instrumental in this, he shall be in fact punishable with fine which may extend to 10,000, and contravening is continuing one with a further fine which may extend to 1,000 rupees for every day after during which the contravening continues. And punishment under 451 in case of repeated default. The company shall be punishable twice the amount of fine for such offence in addition to any imprisonment provided for that relevant offences. And then 452 is punishment for wrongful withholding of property. And then punishment is there for improper use of limited or private limited. And the adjudication of penalties, of course, the central government makes out, in fact, an officer which is not below the rank of a registrar. So with all this, what do you understand? The promoters can escape from this liability only if they can prove that the prospectus was issued without his knowledge or consent, and that, or becoming aware of its issuance, he gave reasonable public notice. He gave reasonable public notice, and then he has taken necessary steps to undo what has been done. And or else he has got reasonable grounds to believe that, and he believed up to the time of issue that the statement was true in the prospectus. So with this background, what we understand, who is a promoter and what is his status, what is his liability, whether the contracts made by him prior to the incorporation are valid or not, void ab initio. Next, promoters are concerned, they can become the directors of the company. They are put on a fiduciary responsibility. What is the fiduciary responsibility? They have to make a disclosure of their secret profits. And for that, it is not prohibited, but it is to be taken permission of by the general body of the company. And then I have given the necessary case law thereon, and I have given the legal consequences also, the civil and criminal liability of the promoters, where what are the sections, provisions of the Companies Act pertaining to civil liability, pertaining to criminal liability. So friends, with this particular background, we conclude our discussion on this particular subject of promoters, and in tomorrow's session, we will take up the prospectus. Prospectus is a document necessary for issuing to the public by public limited companies for procuring share capital or loan capital. So what are the permutations and combinations thereon? And then there are all the